Our story begins during a hard fight between the Emperor of the Sword and an evil moon fairy, who tries to kill him, and when she is about to do it, a new character appears, unrival, the swordsman who splits the moon, who, after a great demonstration of bravery, kills the fairy and manages to save the Emperor. 6 years later, in Waryong Mansion, Muryeong's house, we find another reality. A woman, Muryeong's first wife, is scolding a red-haired boy because he has not fulfilled the task of cleaning the bottom of the courtyard. The angry woman asks him if he does not remember that important visitors are coming that day and scolds him because she thinks that, not being his mother, the boy does not pay attention to her. After hitting him, she asks him to get up. The little boy, frightened by the woman's shouts and blows, replies that he will listen to her and goes to clean up. Near them, there are 3 children watching what is happening, and 2 of them laugh when they see how the child is being beaten. At that moment, near the house, you can see a chariot where 4 people are traveling: the Emperor of the Sword, his wife and their 2 children. During their journey to the house, the father tells his family that they are going to meet his only sworn brother, his uncle Muryeong, who saved him 6 years ago, when he was about to die. While the father talks about his sworn brother's strength and agility, he asks his children to fix their clothes, so that they look presentable. Chun, the Emperor's son, is curious about his uncle and asks his father questions, and he replies that his uncle executed the most perfect sword arts he had ever seen, and that his 9 Heavens sword technique is capable of matching the advanced techniques of his clan, the Nangong clan. After listening to his father, the son asks why his uncle's sword technique is not yet known. His father, to answer his doubt and to prevent his son from offending his uncle, tells him a story. His uncle had 2 wives, but he was especially fond of the second one, who died 6 years ago, after having a baby. This made his uncle very sad, and he retired. That's why you don't know his technique, so please don't tell him anything about his second wife. So, I will, replied to his son Chun. Back in the house, one of the employees is running down the hallway, while the woman is scolding the boy, and she asks the employee what's wrong, and the employee tells her that her husband has come out of his room, knowing that his sworn brother's carriage was near the house and that now he was about to go out to meet them. The woman, after hearing this, felt annoyed, because her husband had not left his room for 6 years and had left them alone, and, looking at the child, told him that he would finally meet his father, but that, in order not to be seen with his dirty clothes by the guests, he should hide. The boy replies that he is going to hide, and she smiles happily at what the boy said and tells him to think about what he has done. The woman leaves him and goes to meet the 3 children who were looking at her earlier, and asks them if they are ready to meet their uncle, and they say yes. Then she looks at the older boy and asks him to be nice to her cousin. At the entrance of the house, the sworn siblings meet and greet each other warmly. The newcomer apologizes for not coming to visit earlier and introduces him to his family. The woman and the young man greet him. Young Chun was shocked to see his father's hero skinny and emaciated. He thought he imagined seeing him different and remembered the 6 years he was locked up. The father looks for his daughter to introduce her to, but the daughter is not there. She has run away to play. The Emperor comments to his brother that his daughter often plays hide and seek and apologizes, but his brother smiles and says that nothing is wrong and behind him. His wife comments that his 4th son also plays hide and seek and asks him to introduce her and the children. Muryeong points them out and introduces them as his family, and the wife tells them that his name is Baek Miju, and invites them to come in and rest from their long journey. As they enter, she asks her son Mubik to look for the missing girl and befriend her. On the terrace of the house, there is the boy who was punished, kneeling with his hands up, waiting for the visitor to leave, so that his punishment will be over. He is tired from being in that position and is hungry. After a long time, tiredness overcomes him and he lies down on the floor, but he is frightened when he sees someone nearby, but realizes that it is not the first mother, whom he fears so much, but a girl. Back at home, the 2 brothers and their wives are talking, and one of them comes up with the idea of marrying off his children, and everyone except Yon is happy with the proposal. The Emperor sees his brother thoughtful and asks him if he agrees to unite their clans, and Muryeong tells him that he prefers his children to decide about their marriage and says that he thinks that the children's life does not belong to the parents. His brother understands his reasons, but his wife, annoyed, thinks that he is sorry for marrying her and that he is not helping her in anything for the family to move forward, and, seeing the Emperor, insists, saying, "Don't you think that our children could like each other?" And the Emperor replies that he thinks so and that they will have more opportunities to see each other to get to know each other. Meiju, excited by the answer, proposes to the Emperor that his clan train his son Mubik in his techniques, and, although the Emperor looks at his brother with astonishment, he also asks the same and says that he believes that his son already knows his technique of the Sword of the 9 Heavens and that he wants him to learn more. but that his health is not going to allow him to train him. Suddenly, he starts coughing and faints. Nubik, meanwhile, is looking for his cousin when he sees his cousin talking to his little sister, who asks him about his nickname and the legends he has read about him. Nubik approaches and apologizes to his cousin for his sister Seolju, and his cousin laughs and tells him that he is not bothering him. Seolju gets upset with his brother, but he tells him that he should not ask personal questions to someone he just met, that it is rude to do so, and then asks his cousin if he knows where his sister is, because he wants to befriend him. Yeon replies that he would like very much for them to become friends and that he also went out to look for her. While they talk, they all go together to look for the girl. Again, the punished boy can be seen in front of the girl who went out to hide, and he wonders who she could be. He notices that she is very pretty and details her clothes. He thinks she is one of the important visitors and thinks about the new punishment for not staying away from the visitors. She looks at him while he thinks, and suddenly, he decides to run to get away, but she stops him and realizes that he may be her uncle's son. But she sees him very skinny, with wounds on his body, and realizes that he is very scared. While she hears that the boy keeps saying sorry, the girl approaches and realizes that the boy has not been well cared for and asks him his name. The boy replies, Jaka Yeon. The girl repeats his name, hugs him and tells him that she will protect him, and the boy starts to cry. After hugging him, she takes him by the hand and asks him to come with her. Together they enter a hole in a wall. The girl took Jaka by the hand and led him to the village and fed him. But on the way, they met some warriors on their way. Jaka was frightened, but his cousin took him by the hand to follow. While that was happening, the emperor was in his brother's room, waiting for him to wake up, and when he did, he asked him about his health, and he felt sorry for what happened, because he had not been able to avoid fainting. And looking at his brother, he said, I told you that the advanced technique of my clan is transmitted through the Jiyushin Chuanu, right? However, I can no longer see through the Jiyushin Chuanu. While his brother listened to him, Yeon told him that everything had happened that day when his second wife died, leaving a baby he did not feel like meeting, because, although he knew he was not to blame, he believes that by meeting him, he will hate him for the death of his wife. After listening to his brother, the emperor tried to comfort him and asked him to rest, that he was not used to see him so weak. But Mariam continued saying, I would like to ask you one last favor. I would like you to take care of my children. The emperor asked him not to say that and to rest, but he continued to ask for his children, because he knew that they were alone, without a father for a long time. Outside the house, near Mariang's room, were the two wives of the sworn brothers, waiting for news, when they saw some warriors arrive, who found the children in the village and took them back home. There the two mothers were distressed for the children, and Beek thanked the girl for finding Jiaka. Soon after, the children's siblings showed up to find out what was going on and saw that the girl would not let go of Jiaka's hand, but her family took her inside the house, while Beek stayed behind to scold the boy. Soon after, in the month of September that year, Yeon Mariam, Jiaka's father, died, and his first mother summoned more than 20 warriors from her own clan to the Yeon clan to fill his absence. These warriors became a squadron within the mansion. That squadron was called White Tiger, and since Mubik had gone to the Nangong clan for training, it was she, Beek Mijo, who took over as the official master of Warjeong Mansion. One day, at the White Tiger squadron headquarters, Beek approaches one of the warriors and, annoyed, asks him if he hasn't found any martial arts manuals of her late husband. But the warrior tells him that he hasn't. Beek becomes much more annoyed with his answer and orders him to keep all the papers related to her husband where she cannot see them. As the warrior was about to start with his task, she ordered him to lock up Jiaka as well. The warrior took the things and the child and left them in a storeroom. Jiaka begged not to be left there, but the warrior told him he had to if he wanted to continue living, and locked him in. Jiaka spent the night in the warehouse, wondering how long he would be locked up, and feeling cold and afraid. The next day, in the morning, the boy sees a hard bread and water left for him by a small door and complained, because he wanted to eat well too. But while he was eating breakfast, he saw a bright light and decided to see. Right where the light could be seen, there was a mirror. He checked it and realized that it was very dusty, so he cleaned it and saw his reflection. He smiled and asked his reflection in the mirror if he too had been abandoned, and he was very scared to see that his reflection in the mirror smiled at him. Winter has arrived and Jiaka is still alone in the warehouse. Outside, two warriors can be seen watching and commenting to each other that the boy has been locked up for a long time, and that it is cold. They believe that the boy will die soon, because the food rations are getting smaller and smaller, and it is very cold. Inside the warehouse, the boy is huddled in a corner, while in the mirror, his reflection is moving and calling out to him, and upon seeing him, he tells him that he is no longer afraid of him, that now he is only cold. His reflection listens to him and moves from one side to the other, thinking, when suddenly, he begins to make movements with a wooden stick. The boy is curious to see what his reflection is doing and thinks he is dancing to get his attention. Gyaka sees the mirror and realizes that he has seen those moves somewhere. They are the arts of the 9 heavens, the martial art moves he had seen his brothers do. Gyaka kept watching the mirror train, but he was very cold. Suddenly, he remembered that when his brothers trained, they could make warm air with those moves in winter and started training. While training, he told the mirror that I did not follow him because I wanted to, but to at least survive the cold. After a while, doing the exercises little by little, he produced hot air and felt good. But he noticed that the mirror asked him to do more. But he looked at it and told it that he didn't want to imitate it. He just wanted to keep warm. Then he turned around to go to another place in the warehouse. But he noticed that the mirror did more complicated movements and told it that he didn't want to do them. But the mirror looked at him and gave him a pout. Gyaka was annoyed by the gesture of his image in the mirror and asked the mirror if he didn't think that soon he could perform such complicated movements and started training. There were times when he could not keep up with the mirror and saw his reflection mocking him, and this made him very angry. But he remembered the moves, thought about his mistakes and kept trying. After a lot of trying, Gyaka got annoyed and decided to cover the mirror with a cloth. But his reflection peeked out from underneath and told the boy that he was going to teach him. Gyaka got excited and uncovered it but warned the mirror not to trick him or he would cover it up again. A moment later, the boy saw the 900 words that were inside the mirror of the Gyushin fairy appear, and although they were complicated, he managed to understand them and realized that the complicated movements that his reflection in the mirror made were nothing more than the celestial inquisitive sword technique, and this changed the life of that unfortunate boy who had been locked in the warehouse, because his confinement allowed him to concentrate on learning that complicated technique that his father had mastered. Gyaka's confinement lasted 10 years and the young man continues to practice the movements in the mirror and feels satisfied with his achievements. He is finally performing the movements exactly as he sees them in the mirror. Mubik returns after 10 years of absence and his family receives him excited. His mother hugs him and tells him that he looks very handsome and that when he finishes his training, now his clan will be the strongest in the whole Henan province. Behind Mubik came 2 young men. Chun and his sister. Beek saw them and apologized for not greeting them earlier and congratulated Chun because his sword art was famous and referred to him saying, "There is no one who does not know the name the Blue Cloud Sword." Then he sees Yon and tells her that she is incredibly beautiful. When he finishes greeting the boys, he invites them to come in and rest, but Yon turns away without greeting. Chun calls her attention, but she ignores him and Beek tells her that it is of no importance and invites them into the house, but calls one of his warriors and asks him to prevent Yon from going near the storehouse and finding Gyaka. But the warrior tells him that the day before he had gone to check the storehouse and had not found the young man. Hearing this, Beek was furious. A day earlier, Gyaka had performed the movements perfectly in the mirror and his reflection applauded him excitedly. The young man was telling the mirror that he had already learned all the techniques and wanted to know what else he could learn. But his reflection surprised him. Pointing upwards, Gyaka looked up at the ceiling of the warehouse and realized there was a hole. He quickly made a ladder out of the boxes in the warehouse and looked up to see the sky again. After 10 years and wondered if he could get out, he climbed up and asked the mirror to produce him to see the sky. But the mirror no longer had a reflection. Gyaka stayed on the roof and spent the whole day there. Beek, after learning that Gyaka was gone, runs to the storehouse and after looking for him, realizes that he could have left through the hole in the roof and told his warriors not to look for him, because he was an ungrateful man who ran away from the clan that fed him. While thinking that the young man had no chance of living outside the storehouse, because he did not know how to make a living. Days passed and Mubik is with his mother, asking her about his younger brother. She tells him that she thinks he left 3 days ago and that she has sent for him, but they have not found him yet. Mubik, worried, tells his mother that his brother has nowhere to go, and she replies that he was motivated by the news that his brother would return victorious from his training. Suddenly, a voice interrupts the conversation. It was young Yon, who hurries to ask about Gyaka. Her mother tells her not to worry, but she tells him that although it has been 3 days since her cousin disappeared, it seems that no one has been living in his room for a long time. Beek insists not to worry, but she turns around and leaves. As Yon leaves, Beek complains about the girl's manners and Mubik returns to ask his mother about his brother and tells her that Yon has the ability to read minds and that she doesn't act that way for nothing, and that there is nothing she cannot figure out when something interests her. Mubik culminates by saying, if a woman like her is in a bad enough mood to ignore us, there must be some reason. Beek told his son that he had not killed him and that, yes, it was true that he had escaped, but that he did not live in his room. But in the storeroom, a while later, Mubik met Yon at the warehouse and she told him that she already knew that the boy had been living there and told him that she would tell his father what had happened, warning him that, although Mubik had been her disciple, the relationship between the two clans could not remain the same. After what had happened, Yon said goodbye to Mubik and left. Mubik was left wondering what he should do. After the relationship between him, his master and his martial sister had been broken. Meanwhile, in the village, Gyaka was watching in amazement how everything had changed, and suddenly, he bumped into someone. It was a grumpy man, but he remembered him as a swordsman from Waryong territory, so he decided to run, to avoid getting caught. Even though the man asked him to stop and show him his ID, Gyaka ran as fast as he could and saw the exit he was looking for. As he ran, he thought that he didn't want to go back to the warehouse and that if he was caught, he would see his first mother again and get scolded. So he ran as fast as he could. As the swordsman chased him, he noticed that the exit door was closing, so he set out to slip out, so he could escape. And as he left, he continued running to avoid being caught. Gyaka finds himself in a forest, far from the village, and realizes that he is hungry. He looks for food in the forest, but only sees some mushrooms that look very nice, and he thinks they will not harm him. Although he is afraid of eating something that might be poisonous, he has no choice and eats them. Later, the boy realizes that it was a mistake to eat the mushrooms, because he has an upset stomach and feels like he might faint and sees everything blurry. He feels so bad that he faints alone in the forest. Later that morning, some men are walking through the forest and see him on the ground and think he is dead, but they see him barely open his eyes. One of them thinks it's better to leave him there, because he's almost dead, but the other thinks they can take him with them, and it might benefit them later. After some hesitation about taking him with them, they think it is not wrong to help him and take him away. When Gyaka manages to fully wake up from his blackout, he thinks he sees a fairy, but it was actually one of the men who rescued him, and upon seeing him wake up, told him that they found him passed out on a mountain and rescued him from being eaten by the mountain animals. Gyaka thanks him and asks him where they are, and he tells him that in the hideout of Wufeng Mountain, because they are bandits. One by one, the 6 men introduce themselves and tell the boy that they are brothers and that to pay for saving his life, he must work for them, and they offer him bread. Gyaka sees the bread and thinks he should not eat it, so he tells them he is not hungry, but they know he is lying, because his stomach was rumbling while he was asleep, and they discuss among themselves what chores he can do and realize that he talks like a child, despite his age. Finally, one of them, called Hyungnam, takes the boy to teach him the tasks he must do, but as he takes him pulling his suit and then he drops him on the ground, Gyaka thinks he is going to hurt him and tries to protect himself with his hands, but Hyungnam tells him that he will not hurt him and that he is not in conditions to look for wild vegetables. The boy is hesitant, but Hyungnam explained what he would do to help them. Gyaka listened attentively but continued to refuse to join them. Listening to him, Hyungnam tells him that he needs to change his life and stop being ignored by others, otherwise he will starve to death. He then shows him Mount Wufeng, telling him that if he becomes one of them, he will be their 7th brother and will rule together with them the 5 peaks of the mountain. After talking with Hyungnam, Gyaka felt excited and left behind his tragic life before arriving to that place, where he would help his new brothers with the household chores while he recovered, and then they would teach him martial arts. He was starting a new life. Time passed and Gyaka managed to learn to survive and adapt to his new life in Wufeng Mountain, enjoying every day with his new brothers and feeling happy for the first time. But all that was about to change. One day, the new brothers of Gyaka sought to join the Union of Bandits, a chaotic sect led by a monster man, who called himself the Blade of the Union of Bandits and whose fame became bigger and bigger, becoming known as the Demon Destroyer of the Heavens. The fame of this man made all the chaotic sects and bandits want to join him, and after accepting them, he made the Bandit Union very powerful. To achieve this, the bandits of Mount Wufeng sought out 2 of the vice leaders of the Bandit Union, Yom Sang-cheol and Lee Young-an, and asked them to join their group. But they, upon seeing them, only scoffed, saying that they looked like beggars and that they needed at least 10 members to be able to act as a fighting force, because the groups of merchants passing around that area were very large. Hearing these words, Gyaka started to get annoyed, but noticed that the 2 men decided to talk alone, and finally, after a while they decided to accept them, on the condition that they would gather 10 members before winter and that they would avoid tarnishing the dignity of the Bandit Union. The 2 men actually either believed in the capabilities of the small group of men, but they needed to fulfill the quota of affiliated groups and guarantee a hideout in the mountains, to avoid being punished by their leader, and hope that the new group would yield their hideout to them after being eliminated before 2 months by the nearby merchant groups. The bandits of Mount Wufeng bid farewell to their new leaders excitedly and celebrated, not knowing that most of the merchant groups paid passage fees only by raising the flag of the Bandit Union. After celebrating, the group decided to get ready to start their work in the bandit union and left Gyaka, the little guy, in charge of the house chores. The boy, although a little annoyed, was convinced that what he had to do was an important part of the job, and he performed his daily tasks faster and faster, until, after 3 months together with his new brothers, one day, he finished the tasks faster and felt that he had to do something while his companions, the Hyung Nims, returned. After thinking for a while, he decided to remember what he had learned in the warehouse and prepare himself for when his companions asked him to join the group. One day, the 3 new members of the group arrived. 2 men, Chol-san, Gi-duk, and a girl, Han Ki-yeon. The Hyung Nims welcomed them and gave Gyaka permission to join the group during the trips to the mountain, because now, Ki-yeon could take care of the house chores. The boy was very excited. But when assigning the order of the 3 new brothers, one of them, Chol-san, thought he didn't want to be Gyaka's younger brother and challenged him to a fight. If Chol-san beat him, he would take his place as the 7th brother and Gyaka would now be the 8th brother. He had to fight to keep his place in the group. The Hyung Nims encourage Gyaka, and he feels he must fight, so that his brothers will take him to the mountain with them. Suddenly, Chol-san apologizes to the boy and gives him a punch that knocks him to the ground. There, Gyaka thinks that he has no weapons to defend himself, but he doesn't plan to give up, because that's not what he learned in the warehouse. Still on the ground, Chol-san keeps hitting him, and the boy asks him why he hits him so much. But Chol-san just tells him to stay on the ground if he doesn't want him to hurt him. After a while, Chol-san gets up and leaves Gyaka on the ground to claim his place as the 7th brother. But the boy stands up, gets on his guard, and tells him that he will not allow it. Gyaka has stood up and asks Chol-san to finish what they started.